Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another episode of our character tier list videos as we look to complete our 5 classes with the Commander class, which features 16 unique commanders. Now these commanders exclude anyone from 8 princes and any non-deployable characters, as those would each get their unique tier list in the future. And for this video, we will also take the same approach as our other tier lists by first conducting a complete overview of each of these characters to see what makes them unique, to see their strength, to see their weakness, before we come back here and place them into their tiers. So let's kick things off in alphabetical order with Cao Cao. So starting off with Cao Cao, we have the Strategic Mastermind, which gives him 40 points of Cunning, 25 points of Authority, and 15 points of Instinct. This is a total of 80 points. This is on the high end for the base game. He also gets plus 50% income from family estate if he's faction leader. So this is not going to apply in most cases unless you're playing as Cao Cao. And this is worth about 1,000 per turn because family estate starts out 2,000 and stays that way the whole time. And you get 50% additional boost on that per turn. So it's actually quite a substantial increase in income in the early game. He also enjoys minus 25% redeployment costs. This can be stacked with his own flexibility for up to 50% just by having him as the leader or as one of the prime minister in the faction, which is actually quite good because redeployment does get quite pricey. You also get 15% recruitment cost for cavalry, also a nice bonus, and plus 2 spies and pawn positions. Now the pawn position is not going to matter unless you're playing as Cao Cao with his unique scheme mechanic. But this is obviously quite powerful, and the 2 spies not too shabby either if you're not playing as Cao Cao. Then moving on to his traits, we have ambitious, dutiful, suspicious. Now there's nothing too important to note here. You might pick up ambitious if you have him as a character where you don't play as Cao Cao's faction, and you might want the 5% from all sources by making him administrator. But honestly, given his list of unique bonuses when he's a leader, prime minister, or heir, you almost never will use this. You also get plus 10 points undercover network cost for enemy spies. Not a big deal, but it's just nice to have. Usually your spy defense is really just being careful with who you recruit. Then in terms of items, you have quite a bit of good items. You have Trust of God, which is 1k 1k damage for base and armor piercing. This is quite high for a sword. You also get 30 points of melee attack rate, which is the highest you'll find on any weapon. You do lose instinct here, 15 points worth of instinct, but you do make up for it with a lot of authority boost. Immune to fear and terror is good, but not really game changing. You have a decent armor. 55 base is good, 18 is good. These are pretty average values, not really outstanding, but not bad. 30% range block chance, 12% speed. You do start out with a unique horse. The Shadow Runner, you get 105 speed, 2k mass. This is a good ratio here. 105 speed is very top end, and 2k mass is not the heaviest, but it's pretty good. You get 5 points of authority on top of that, 10 points of cunning, and there's also a set bonus on the horse, which I did not include here. You can boost this with the Jade Horseman, I believe, and you get about 25 extra melee charge bonus. It's not huge, but it's nice. You get 25% chance evading capture post-battle. That's pretty typical on gold horses. And the special bonus for this horse is 5% chance to avoid ambush for your own army. Not that important, but it does help. And then in terms of unique skills, we can first talk about what commanders start out with. So Unyielding Earth and Nature's Ally are default skills for the commander. And there is one more that we'll see later on. But his unique skill here is the Impervious Presence. And this is a very interesting skill to read. It targets all generals. It has an effective range of infinite. It activates for 1 second and then goes on a 4-second cooldown. And during the 1-second activation, it will decrease all your cooldowns by 5 seconds. So if you apply the cooldown, essentially this skill is every 5 seconds decrease your cooldown by 5 seconds. And you might think that sounds stupid. But that's because your own cooldown is going down during that 5 seconds anyways, and in addition, you lose another 5 seconds. So essentially, Cao Cao will halve all your cooldown time. It's actually a little quicker than half because during the last 5 seconds, it only takes 1 second to decrease it by additional 5 seconds. So if you technically do the math, you are actually saving 4 seconds there, but that's a very minor point. Essentially, you're having all the cooldowns for all your generals on the field, regardless of their range. So that is quite nice. Depending on who you pair him up with, this skill obviously will have different degrees of power level. So there is going to be a change here. Let's say if you pair him up with Liu Chong, who we'll see later on, with an infinite ability of show of force, then this combination can get quite crazy, as you will do a ton of damage twice as fast. And then moving on to our next character, we have Cao Cao's son, Cao Pi, the political animal. So he retained his background bonus from before he got his unique art. It gives him 15 points of cunning, 10 points of authority, and 5 points of expertise. This is sadly a bit low, a total of 30. We're not going to see this change as the game is no longer getting updated. But he did retain the 10% corruption reduction. Now this bonus by itself, it probably makes him one of the best characters in the game, because dealing with corruption is one of the most difficult aspects of the game for beginners. And having 10% faction-wide from one of your characters is just really game-changing, because your goal at the end of the day is to reduce your faction corruption by 100%. So regardless of what your actual corruption level is, by reducing your corruption by 100%, you will have 0% corruption, because you have to multiply the two. It's not a subtraction. So it's not like I have 50% corruption, so I need minus 50%. No, you need minus 100 if you want to get rid of all your corruption. If you only have minus 50, you'll still have 25% corruption. So having 10% faction-wide on a character background, it's really strong. Then looking at his traits, dutiful, clever, cruel. Nothing too crazy here, nothing we haven't covered before. So let's just move on. And we have his armor. He has 46 armor. So whoever made the armors for Fates Divided really got creative with the numbers, because they all have very weird values. And he also has 13 points of authority and a very interesting boost of satisfaction for this army. So it seems like if you keep him with people who are unhappy, you can keep them happy by boosting their satisfaction by 25. But you can only do this with 2 characters because you need to be in the same army. So it's interesting bonus. It's helpful, of course, but maybe not that helpful. It does help that Cao Pi is also easily accessible because he is a son, so you can take him via marriages. But we're really not considering too much about obtainability or accessibility or age with this guide, because that becomes a bit unfair for some of our older characters, and also vary quite a bit depending on your start date. And then in terms of his skills, he has a showcase of what a generic commander looks like. In the future, if someone have no unique skills, I will not be showing this, but in this case, let's take a look. Stonebark is the standard skill for the first position on the left side for commanders. Nature's Ally is the second, and Unyielding Earth is the third. Overall, these are boosting skills. This tends to be the trend for commanders. That gives your units unbreakable quite a bit. You get range block chance, you get melee resistance, you get morale, you get melee evasion, you get a little bit of speed. So this is kind of the playstyle for commanders. Then moving on, we have his uncle and Cao Cao's cousin, Cao Ren, the brave hunter, who also retained his background bonus from before he got his artwork redone, and it's pretty bad. 15 points of expertise, 10 points of instinct, 5 points of authority. You get 10% melee damage for all melee cavalry. Now this is a reflection of the fact that he also got a class change, because he was originally a sentinel. Now he's a commander who looks green, so it's confusing with champions, but he's a commander now, and his background bonus actually kind of reflect that. So maybe he was supposed to be a commander to begin with, because his bonus was 10% melee damage for all melee cavalry, but he does have that 15 points of expertise. It's confusing and all over the place. Then looking at his traits, you have dutiful, determined, intrepid. Nothing too crazy here. And then in terms of his armor, we have the weird armor value again, 41 and 17 authority. 10% range damage on the armor, which is quite interesting, as he does start out with a unique bow, Honor Manifested. And this is a very standard bow in terms of damage. These are all showcased on large unit size, so 1.1k base, 600 armor piercing. That's the same for all gold bows. 250 range. The only unique thing here is the 10% ammo for own retinue. That's obviously a nice boost. It's worth quite a bit of cunning, so instead of 10 points of cunning, getting this is probably better. And then in terms of his unique skill, he does have one. He has Heavenly Presence. Now this skill starts out in the opposite side of his starting skill tree. So if you want this, I think you have to be at least rank 7, maybe 6, if you rush for it. And it's a very, very powerful skill because it's an unlimited heal. And it doesn't target just generals like mending, it targets all units. So it's a 3k heal over 60 seconds and also get 10 points of morale. It has a 50-meter effective range, which is pretty decent, and it's activated over the 60 seconds, which is when you get the full heal. It's great. It's unlimited use, unlike mending. The drawback here would be the 120-second cooldown. Of course, if you pair him up with his cousin Cao Cao, that will only be roughly 60-second cooldown, or technically 56-second cooldown, if we do the math exactly. So it's quite powerful. This is a very, very nice skill. On paper, it makes him one of the best generals in the game, but you need to make him level up and learn this skill. So that's something we rarely consider in these tier lists because their starting skill is sometimes all over the place. Some characters starts out with their strongest skill, some does not. And it also matters when you get the generals. Sometimes they're already high level, you already have the skill, and you can also reroll skills now. So it does get a little bit complicated in terms of determining their strength. But on paper, this is definitely one of the best skills in the game. Now, moving on, we have the daughter of the Southlands, Da Qiao. Now, we covered Cao Cao before in our strategist guide, and now we are looking at her older sister, the commander Da Qiao. So she gets 15 points of authority, 10 points of expertise, 5 points of cunning, and 15% trade influence. This is a very minor bonus. It's pretty much worth a tycoon, a fuller item. And then in terms of her faction-wide bonuses from her traits, she does get 5% construction cost from creative. Loyal is good, beautiful is good for herself, but pretty bad if you want to make her your heir, prime minister, or faction leader. Then moving on to her armor, she has 20 base, 18 authority, 10% speed, 2 morale when attacking. These all look very reasonable and very well designed actually, after looking at those weird armor values from Face Divided. And then moving on to her unique skills, she has 2. So she kept unyielding Earth, and her unique ability that's actually super unique is the Qiao sisters. We talked about this when looking at Cao Cao. It's pretty bad. You need both the sisters on the battlefield at the same time, and it will give you, forever boost of 10 morale and immune to terror. If you think about it, this skill really, what happened is you replaced Nature's Ally, in her case, because she's a commander, which also give plus 10 morale, and also a speed boost, and ignore force penalties. But you do have to stay close to your units. Here's 5,000 range is pretty effective, but overall, it's not really a valuable skill. And you have to have both sisters, and they have to be in the same army. So a lot of conditions there. What makes her slightly unique is she picked up the mending skill, which is a skill usually reserved for bandit champions, sorry. And it's 4 use only. It's a decent amount of heal. It's a great armor and evasion boost on top of that. It can only target generals, so there is some restriction there. It's a great dueling skill. It's a great healing skill. And it's nice that she has that. So that's something unique about her. Although you could make an argument that you could just get the same thing by getting a champion who's a bandit. And that's totally true. So there's a quotation marks around the unique skill here. It's not that unique, but for regular commanders, it is a bit unique. And for the humble monarch, Lady Bian, she gets 10 points of cunning, 20 points of authority, 5 points of satisfaction if she's prime minister, heir, or faction leader. Not too impressed with this bonus. It's nice to have, obviously, but not that impressive. And then we're looking at dutiful, humble, and distinguished. Nothing really for the faction, which is usually what you want these commander characters to be. And that's another point. Commanders are really good prime minister, heir, and faction leader because they come with 4 unique skills that will give faction-wide boost. Or actually, they're not really unique. Only one of them is really unique. I think nobility is the only unique one. But they get nobility, which gives like 1 extra assignment. You get 25% from flexibility, and you get 1 more skill there. That understanding, I believe, which gives 1 extra rank, and there's 1 more for faction support. pretty much the best class in terms of putting someone in those roles, and you also get high authority stats on them, which gives good satisfaction. Now here on the traits, you're obviously not getting anything extra. You do get quite a bit of authority, 16 points more. In terms of her armor, this is where she gets very, very interesting. So she has 55 base armor, which is very high for someone wearing robes. 18 points of authority, that's good. You get 15% range block chance and 30% speed. This is not a typo on my part, but I think whoever designed her made this typo. So she got her unique art in A World Betrayed. That is when most characters got 15% speed. In her case, I think whoever made her flipped it on her armor. She should have 15% speed and 30% range block chance, which are standard values for both of these numbers. But instead, she got 15% range block chance and 30% speed, which is the biggest speed boost you will find on any armor in the game. Now, of course, she doesn't have access to Final Rush, which will boost your speed insanely high once you reach half health, which is only available on Vanguard generals. But at full health, she is one of the fastest characters in the game, if you give her a good horse. So she has naturally 30% speed boost here. She has 25% boost from mobility skill. And because she doesn't have any unique skills, she actually has Nature's Ally, which is another 25% speed boost. So she has 80% speed boost just from her character's armor and skill. And if you give her a good horse, she will be one of the fastest characters in the game at full health. Because you can't compete with the Vanguards once they lose half health. That speed goes up by another like 50%. That's kind of unfair. But at full health, you can also be unbreakable from your meditation skill. So she becomes one of the best looping generals in the game. You can set her up in encampment and she can beat any army in the game because she will just be super fast and she'll be unbreakable and she'll just loop you for days. Then we have the steadfast loyalist, Lady Mi, Liu Bei's wife here. 20 points of authority, 5 points of expertise, 5 points of resolve. She does give 10 points of satisfaction for all characters and 3 morale. So she's worth, a concubine or a philosopher. Not bad. And you get loyal, determined, humble as her traits. Also not bad, but nothing really extra for faction-wide boosts. And her armor. So we see here we get the 40 points of base. You get 18 authority, 15% melee evasion, 15% range block chance. Nothing too crazy here. No speed boost, which is actually very interesting. She also got introduced in A World Betrayed. And then we have her husband, the virtuous idealist Liu Bei, who has 40 points of resolve, 25 points of authority, 15 points of expertise. So total of 80 points on the high end here. He will lose 25% income from family estate due to his poor background or poor upbringing. That's worth 500 income per turn, so you do start out with 500 less. You get 100 points of faction support instantly. So whenever you capture a location, they will automatically support you. There will not be a period of negative public order and decreasing income. And you also have minus 50% upkeep from militia infantry. This is kind of Liu Bei's playstyle, focused on militia. And you get plus 3 starting rank for militia recruits, which will increase their morale a little bit, their attack rate a little bit. And overall, this kind of reinforced the militia playstyle for Liu Bei. Now, militias have been nerfed quite a bit. When the game was first launched, spamming militias was actually super strong, even without these bonuses. You had different bonuses when the game first launched, and militias can hold their own because their morale can stay high. Now the problem is the weapons got nerfed. Militia weapons now a tier by themselves. It used to be they have the same weapon as the medium tier units. Now they have weaker weapons, so weaker damage. Their range unit, the militia archers, which used to be very good, now have the least range. Their range got nerfed. I think they only have 180 range. And their morale is the big thing. Because routing right now is such an easy occurrence and something that you can pretty much depend on. Militia units are just not going to stand up in a fight. So these bonuses here are really not going to do much for your army. So they're not really strong bonuses anymore. And if we look at his traits, we get kind, which have additional boost to satisfaction, humble, fraternal. These are all pretty standard and pretty good traits. And then moving on to his unique items, he does start out with an extra sword, 双股剑. which only has 1k base and 522 armor piercing. So if you take a look at that, it's a lot weaker. It's not one of the strongest swords in the game. It's actually quite weak. And you also have 24 melee attack rate because it's a dual sword, so you actually lose some attack rate. So that's also not good. It provides only stats, which is also not that good. So overall, not a strong weapon here. Armor is also a bit lacking, 38 base, which is on the weaker side, 6 points of resolve, 15 points of authority. Those are nice, and you get the encourage for your units to help their morale, which is something you need. You really don't need retinue upkeep bonus anymore because you're spamming militias. You're really not going to have a very expensive army. Of course, if you're not spamming militias, obviously that will help. Then we are looking at his skills. So he has a pretty average skill tree. We're talking about Stonebark, which will give 30 seconds of Unbreakable, which is nice. Nature's Ally, which will give 10 points morale, which is nice. Inspiring Words, that's his unique skill, will give 60 seconds of Unbreakable for anyone within 50-meter range. That is also very important. So basically the idea here is you have abilities to try to boost morale or make your unit unbreakable so your militias can fight longer and fight better with different boosts that you can give them. That's kind of the playstyle here. I don't think it's super strong. Now, of course, you don't have to run militias. You can run other units, premium units, and then use Inspiring Words to give them Unbreakable, 25% melee evasion, 33% melee attack rate. Those are great bonuses for melee units. So that's definitely the playstyle you probably want to lean into. But from a design perspective, the idea of Liu Bei spamming militias is really just not feasible anymore with the latest patches that really set up the morale decrease, that set up the nerfs for the militias. It's basically an ongoing patch to weaken the militia spam. Then moving on, we have the Gentleman of the Han, Liu Biao, who gets 30 points of authority, or 30 points of cunning actually, 20 points of authority, 10 points of expertise. He has some great faction-wide bonuses, 20% decrease to character salary. This is actually kind of huge. You will likely have a huge roster near the mid or late game, and 20% is worth quite a bit because of all the court positions you're going to have, all the titles you're going to give out. So this is a nice decrease of cost there. And you get 20% recruitment cost for polearm infantry discount. That's also great because that is one of the units that you're always really going to recruit. Not to mention that Liu Bei has a very nice unique one, but in almost all your campaigns, you're going to be recruiting quite a bit of polearm units. Spear Guard is definitely one of the must-have units in the game. So having this discount is nice, but what makes him really strong is the 50% diplomatic income from tributaries. So unless you're playing as Zhengjiang, the only way you get tributary income or diplomatic income from tributaries is by making vassals or by making subjects. So those will both be tributary income that they give you per turn. And basically whatever amount they give you, you get 50% extra. And that's actually pretty huge. It can build up. So it does encourage a vassal playstyle or a subject playstyle, mainly vassal. Subject's kind of late game and not that efficient. So if you're playing a vassal playstyle, regardless whether you're using Liu Bei or not, this will be very helpful. If you're playing as Zhengjiang, getting him will be incredibly strong for your playstyle because demand tribute is also diplomatic income from tributaries, and you have boost for that yourself, and then you get another 50%. It just adds up, in the tens of thousands here. And then moving on to his unique traits or starting traits: scholarly, indecisive, elusive. There's quite a bit going on here. Overall, nothing too crazy. You balance out the character experience loss with the experience gained from scholarly. You have a few spying countermeasures here, and you get post-battle evade capture, 10% extra commerce, silk, and spice if you make him administrator, which you're probably not, just because the faction-wide bonus is so good. So that's really what's going on here with Liu Biao. Then for his armor, 20 base for his robe, makes sense. 18 authority, 30% range block chance, minus 15% retinue upkeep. Nothing too fancy here. And he does not have any unique skills. Then moving on, we have the Prince of Chen, Liu Chong. So here we have another 80-point character, 40 resolve, 25 authority, 15 expertise, a lot of combat stat here. He gives scare and 20% recruitment cost for Chen units. Now these we're going to discount the power level because that only applies when you're playing as him. If you get him as any other faction, this will be completely useless for you. 15% range damage for crossbow. Now that's good because he specializes in crossbow for both his unique unit. But even if you get him in another faction, you can definitely use this boost for crossbow. Now the bad thing about this is base damage, and crossbows tend to have high armor piercing damage. So really what's good here, if you get him and you're not playing as his faction, so you don't have access to his insanely strong crossbow units, you want to put him on repeating crossbowmen because they have pure base damage, and this will be the best boost for them. So an army of Zhuge Liang and Liu Chong would be like the dream for repeating crossbowmen. And then you also get +3 starting rank for all range units. In terms of his traits, we have Wise, Patient, Charismatic. Nothing too crazy here either. And looking at his items, he starts out with 3. Prince of Liu Chong's crossbow. So this is standard for crossbows. The damage is a little bit lighter than the bow. 60 less armor piercing damage, which is quite interesting actually. And you get 10 points of cunning and 10 points or 10% ammo. So you get both of the good stats. You cannot fire this on the move. You can also not fire this backwards. So you cannot kite with this. But if, let's say, the enemy general is sitting inside a siege and you can shoot this while they stand still, this will still be very effective. The armor value is very high on his armor, but because he's a Mandate of Heaven general, there's no extra stats, no bonuses. 15 points authority, 75 armor is all you're going to get. He also starts with the Ebon Prince horse, which is a very slow but very massive horse. So it's good for charging. It also gives him 10% melee evasion as well. And that's pretty much it for his items. Quite a bit of items, nothing too premium, but starting out with 3 is obviously better than starting out with just the armor. And he has a unique skill here, Show of Force. This is one of the most broken skills in the game. We showcased this on one of our old early game playbook videos. Unfortunately, the game also recognized that it's very broken. They didn't want to nerf this skill. What they did is change his starting tree, so he no longer starts with this skill. You have to level up and get it, because he used to start with the skill, and you can pretty much wipe out any faction you want with this. Because this essentially is a 1 arrow hail of arrow. You only shoot 1, you don't shoot a hail of arrow. You only shoot 1 arrow, and it does insane damage, 3.8k base. And it also demoralizes the enemy, so you can force enemy units to rout, or you can kill enemy generals with this. And there's only a 60-second cooldown. So you can spam this forever and just kite and do this to kill off entire enemies, armies of enemies and generals. There's nothing stopping you. And that is what made this incredibly strong. So they nerfed this just by removing it from his starting skill, but once you do level him up to get this, he can solo any army he wants. And that's what makes Liu Chong incredibly strong, on top of all the other bonuses we have covered. Then moving on, we have the proponent of peace, Liu Zhang, who had a small update in the latest patches, I think. Or actually, I think he started out with the skill, just no one ever noticed him until the recent patch where his father got introduced into the game. I think he had the same setup, but just no one really took a look at him. We get 10 points of cunning, 15 points of authority, 5 points of instinct, 50% food production. These are not great bonuses, but 50% food production is not bad. If you're going tall, you're going to need this. And then in terms of his trait, clever, incompetent, careless. 2 of these are quite bad. Clever make up for some of it, but it's not good. Then we have a very boring armor, 20 point base for a robe, 15 points of expertise, 6 points of instinct. In terms of skills, this is where he gets really interesting. He has a replacement skill called Seize Fire. Now this is an active ability with 50-meter range, 60-second durations, which is quite high, and 100 seconds of cooldown, 120-second cooldown, which is also quite high, but 60-second duration is good. It gives all units, it targets both friendly and enemy units within a 50-meter range. It will give those units 50% damage resistance, so all of them will become more damage resistant. And it will give them 33% decrease to their melee attack rate, so they can't hit as much, and it will immobilize them. So there's quite a few ways to use this ability. So if you use this on your own units, they will become sturdier, 50% damage resistant. They will be less efficient at hitting back at 33% melee attack rate. So if you use them on, say, spear guards on your front line, they can tank up damage better, but they will deal less damage, and they can't move. If you use this on the enemy, you freeze them in place for 60 seconds, and they lose melee attack rate, but they double up, or they get 50% boost to damage resistance, which is something you probably don't want. But Immobilize might buy you time to maneuver around the unit, right? Let's say the enemy cavalry is charging at you, you immobilize them, and you buy yourself extra 60 seconds where they can't move. You don't have to hit them. You just have to reposition your line so that they can't really get out of your spear, for example. And once they can move, you kill them. Or you can use this on your range unit. If you use this on your range unit, it doesn't hurt them. The melee attack rate does not hurt the range firing rate, so they can still hit the same. And they're 50% more damage resistant. So there's a lot of way you can use this, and if you're creative with it, I think it's actually quite strong. 60 seconds of Immobilize is pretty strong offensively, and 50% damage resistance is obviously very strong defensively. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with Liu Zhang here. And then moving on, we have the Emerald-Eyed Administrator, Sun Quan. So he starts out with 60 points, pretty standard for a unique character. 30 points of Resolve, 20 points of Authority, 10 points of Expertise. He also will get 50% income from Family State if he's a leader, 5% campaign movement range, 10 points of military supplies. Now these bonuses are decent, but not game-changing. Obviously, you cannot get campaign movement range easily from most sources, so it's good to see it here. Military supplies, not that important unless you're playing bandits, but overall, not a bad list of bonuses. In terms of his traits, we have Loyal, Reckless, and Perceptive. I don't know how he ended up with Reckless, but it's not really going to affect him because you're not really going to make him into an administrator, even though his name is Emerald-Eyed Administrator here. And then moving on to his armor, 45 base, 15 points of authority, 12% speed. Everything seems discounted here, right? You don't have 55 base, you don't have 18 points, you don't have 15%, so nothing too fancy here going on for Sun Quan. And he has no unique skills, so we can move on to the next character, the Ardent Educator Wang Lang, who got an art upgrade, so he has stuck with 30 points of stats, 15 points in cunning, 10 points in authority, 5 points in resolve, and he has 10% character experience, which I think is pretty bad. He's essentially worth about a level 2.5 school, and I think it's 8% for level 2 and 12% for level 3, so he's worth about level 2.5 school worth of boost if you make him Prime Minister, Heir, Faction Leader. He has Scholarly on top of that, Dutiful, Honorable, nothing too crazy here. His armor, 50 point base, pretty high. I think this is a phenomenon from A World Betrayed. 18 points authority, 15% range block chance, 15% speed. Those are not bad bonuses. And he has no unique skill. So we can move on to the Favor Son, Yuan Shang. So because he got his artwork and new character, essentially he got a new background because he was super generic before this. So he does have updated stats. Total of 60 points. 25 resolve, 25 authority, 10 points of instinct, not bad. We get 5% upkeep discount for melee cavalry. That's a very small discount, but obviously you'll take anything. Plus 2 starting rank for all cavalry unit. That one's kind of helpful. And 5% income from industry faction wide. That one's actually quite nice. Industry has high base values, so any sort of faction wide boost to industry is actually very strong. So that's a very nice bonus. And then in terms of his traits, everything is bad. We have greedy, we have vain, we have sickly. So now you can reroll skills or reroll traits, which is going to help him a lot. But assuming you cannot reroll any of these are all terrible traits to start out with. And you also have a decent armor, 50 base, 15 authority, 10% speed, and 15 points of ability recharge rate. I think it's just 15% decrease on your cooldowns. But I'm not too sure about the math there. It's helpful, but probably not game-changing. He pretty much have the standard tree. What happens with the Yuan clan is that they will all have familial conflict. In most cases, it replaces nature's ally. It's a great ability for personal boost. It will boost the general. These are boosts for himself. You'll give him 50% increased damage, 50% increased melee charge bonus, which is huge, and 50% melee attack rate. So basically all the Yuan clan will become excellent duelists and fighters if there is at least a pair of them on the field. So you need to have a friendly unit with this ability in range. And the range is, kind of infinite, just on the battlefield. And you have infinite duration of this boost. So it's nice, but I don't think it's game changing because it's just on the generals, making them good duelists. And moving on to his father, preeminent commander, Yuan Shao himself, we get 30 points of resolve, 20 points of authority, 10 points of instinct. These are pretty standard. 100% reinforcement range for him, so your army can reinforce from farther. 50% income from family estate. Another discount for polearm units, only 15% this time. And you get 3 starting rank for polearm infantry recruit. So obviously combining him with Liu Biao will create quite interesting setups for polearm units focused factions. And then we have arrogant, charismatic, vain, pretty much bad traits, but charismatic is pretty good. And if you can reroll vain, things can be better. And looking at his armor, so he has 70 base, that's very high, 80s max. You get instinct, you get authority, you get attack rate. Obviously, these will factor together with his familial conflict trait, or skill, which will make him an excellent duelist with that high armor and the extra boost to attack rate, 55% if you add the two together, and a little bit of instinct adds damage. Distant courage is his unique skill. It's a passive buff. It has 150 effective range, so it's a long range, much longer than most abilities. It has infinite duration, but you have to be not in combat. So you're running Yuan Shao around away from combat, but far or close enough to your units, or where it's 150 range, to give them 50% melee charge bonus and 50 points morale. So these are really good bonuses. So if you are playing as, let's say, Liu Bei, and you're trying to play militia spam, Yuan Shao will be someone you want to have, because you can have him hover around your units right behind them, giving them 50 points of morale, which is actually super huge. The melee charge bonus, or how you would use him for most armies, would be you just hover him around behind your cavalry as they are charging to give them 50% boost to their melee charge bonus, which is a huge boost. So that's also very strong. So overall, distant courage is just really strong ability here. This is really what Yuan Shao is known for. And moving on to his brother or cousin, depending on what time periods you're looking at, brother technically, and ambitious powermonger Yuan Shu. 20 points of cunning, 30 points of authority, 10 points of expertise, pretty standard. Once again, increased income from family estate, decreased construction costs for resource element, which are the resource counties, not the capital. Pretty good discount. You also have discount for melee infantry. This is for his unique unit. These are bad, but if you're using like yellow dragons in the late game, for example, or if you're maybe playing with pearl dragons, this could help a little. 15 points of charge bonus for all units, 15 flat, not percentage. It's helpful for infantry, but not very helpful for cavalry, very small number for cavalry. In terms of his traits, ambitious, cruel, arrogant, a lot of red on this page, a lot of bad bonuses on this page. It's not really going to affect him if he's a leader, because these desire for higher office and administrator just really not going to matter. But if you pick him up, you do have to be mindful for some of these. In terms of his armor, he has 15 base, 6 cunning, and 15 authority, 30% range block chance, pretty below average for armors here. He will also have familial conflict, but looking at his armor, he's really not the duelist, so this is not really what's going to make him strong. Aside from this, no unique skills, so rather weak here. And then we have Yuan Tan, the unfavored son. So he got art, but because he had the unfavored son as his background before, he didn't have an update to the stats. So we're still looking at 5 points of cunning, 20 points of authority, 5 points of instinct for a total of 30 points. He will only have 3 morale when defending for own retinue. So this is not even for their own army. So that's not good. And then you get 15% income from family estate. This is interesting because this is the only family estate boost where you don't have to be the leader. Usually you have to be the leader. In this case, you can have him as heir of prime minister, and this is worth, I believe, 300. Because it's 2,000 base, so 300 income per turn. It's not terrible. In the early game, it's actually quite good, but in the late game, this falls off quite a bit, obviously. And there's no other bonuses, so that's a bit lacking there as well. He has 3, average traits, borderline bad, but not as bad as most of the Yuan clan because he doesn't have Vayne. Vayne with the increase to retinue upkeep does make things a bit difficult. And then the strong point of Yuan Tan. This is what really has him going. He has 80 points of armor, which is insanely high. Obviously, you could max armor out with a horse. We talked about Sun Jian's horse being able to do that. But 80 base is as high as you will find for any just armor in the game. 11 points of authority. This armor is created during Face Divided. It has weird numbers. 15% retinue upkeep, which is pretty good, and 2 morales when attacking. So he has 3 morale when defending for his own retinue, but 2 morale when attacking for himself on his armor. It's just kind of weird. But in terms of his skills, he has familial conflict, which will pair very nicely with his armor, but this will require him to have a family member with him in battle and also to give him a good weapon, because you're not really boosting much if you don't have a good weapon, and he does not start out with one. So basically, he has the defensive armor set up to do well in combat with familial conflict, but you must find him a good weapon to help him do that. So that kind of wraps up the overview for all our characters. Let's hop back into tier list and rank all of them. Alrighty, so we have concluded the overview of all 16 characters here, and we're going to rank them from bottom up, looking at the worst characters. Now, be mindful that most of these characters are really good overall. If we're comparing them with all the classes, most commanders are at a premium because their ability to be good leaders, heirs, and prime ministers. And for most of these characters, they are leaders at the start of the game, so they do start out with a lot of stats. They start out with a lot of faction-wide bonuses. But since this is a tier list among the commanders, things are going to get a bit tough in terms of competition because they all have those 4 skills that make them good leaders, heirs, and prime ministers. And there's a bunch of faction leaders here, so we're going to be pretty picky with where they rank. So if they seem a little bit low for you, just be mindful that this is a competition among themselves. So starting at the bottom, we're going to put Wang Lang as our D tier. There's really nothing going on for him. He has 10% character experience boost. He has a interesting armor setup. I think it's a little bit higher than usual, but you're really not going to use him for combat. The 10% character experience is rather weak. We talked about how he's only worth about a level 2.5 school, so nothing really good there. And he has no unique skills, so there's nothing that makes him even better than a standard generic commander in terms of skills. So he's going to sit at D, and he's going to be the only one at D because most of these characters, as we mentioned, are pretty good. And then moving on to the C rank, we're going to put Yuan Tan there. So Yuan Tan almost was in the D tier, except his armor saved him. So he doesn't have any good faction-wide bonuses. 300 extra income per turn from that 15% boost is not really worth that much. And if you think about it, he has 80 armor base. He has the familial conflict. So you need to pick up 2 of the Yuan clan members when you're not playing as the faction to make that work. And then you have to find him a good weapon to make him stand out with that armor value, with those high attack rates and damages. So he's going to be a C because potentially he has a better ceiling than, let's say, Wang Lang, but he's not that strong. And then for different reasons, I think Lady Ni can also be C tier. She's worth a concubine item or a philosopher item with her background of 10 points of satisfaction boost. In the early game, this is actually super useful. She's an excellent wife. It's hard to marry her because she doesn't start out in any ruling family tree. If you're playing as Tao Qian, you will start with her. Or if you're playing as Liu Bei in a later start date, you will also start with her. And she makes for excellent heir because you can marry her. She'll be part of the family. You get the 10 points of satisfaction. She still has the follower spot open. So if you do have a concubine on top of that, you get 20 points. And she also has pretty decent authority stats. A lot of very good traits to make her personally pretty satisfied with your faction already. So nothing wrong with her, but nothing too, standing out with her. So she's going to drop here into C. And then joining them is going to be Sun Quan because he has 5% campaign movement range. It's not bad, but it's not really game changing. 5%, it's not huge. And 10 points of military supplies, also not game changing at all. The 50% boost to family estate only applies if you're the leader. So good luck with that, given that the chapter packs are not going forward anymore, and you're not really going to set him up for that position. So overall, there's nothing special going on for him. He doesn't start with any unique weapons. His armor is pretty average. His stats pretty average. He has no unique skills. So he sits firmly here in C. Then moving on to B. We have the unfavored son here, so we're going to have the favored son here. He doesn't have anything too crazy going on for him. He has really bad starting traits. That's his weakness. Hopefully you can reroll at least one of them. And he has 5% industry, which is really what's going to separate him from these. 5% industry is going to be worth more than the 15% to family estate, because you're thinking about base values here. 2,000 is the base value for family estate. So if your industry overall faction-wide can reach 6,000, then obviously it's better. 6,000 is really about 15 commandery worth of state workshop. If you have other counties, it's going to decrease that. Eventually you will get there, and eventually this will be better. So early game, obviously family estate is a great source of income. Late game, the industry is going to be better. And on top of that, he gets other bonuses for cavalry, starting rank, and also some upkeep discount for melee calves. So those things will all factor. He also has a decent enough armor, although his traits is really what's holding him back. He has better stats compared to his brother because he has his background kind of redone, because he was super generic before, and now he has a unique background which has the 60 points of stats. And then joining him in B is going to be our other lady, Lady Bian. So Lady Bian here have a higher rank than Lady Mi. Not because she will give you more satisfaction, she will actually give you less. She has only 5 points. But her unique thing is she has 30% speed on her armor. We mentioned this. She's the fastest general when full health. And because she's a commander, she has meditation like everyone else here, which makes her unbreakable, giving her the ability to loop enemies around. Most efficient at doing that. So very, very strong there. But people don't like to exploit and loop, and you can also loop with slower generals, so she's not going to get a lot of points for that. But compared to everyone else here, I think the B rank is a pretty fair rank for her. And then we have Liu Zhang. 50% food, not a big deal. Low stats, low, very boring armor setup. Ceasefire. So ceasefire is kind of those skill that require some skills to use and some creativity, because 50% damage resistance, decrease in melee attack rate, and also immobilize can create some very interesting combinations of when you want to use it, where you want to use it, and for 60-second duration, it's actually quite powerful. So I think that skill alone can elevate him quite a bit, and he's going to belong in the B tier here. Then moving on to A, this is when competition gets a little bit fierce. I think, before we do that, I think we forgot someone. Da Qiao here. So Da Qiao is not going to sit in B, actually. I'm going to put her in C. So she has Daughter of the Southland. That ability to tell sisters, completely useless. 15% trade influence, pretty useless. She has Mending. Mending is great, obviously. And Mending on Commander is unique. But you can get Mending on any Bandit champions, as we mentioned. So I don't know if I want to give her too many points for having that. Because sometimes, actually in most times, I'd rather have a champion than a commander on the battlefield. So obviously it's nice that she has Mending, but I'm not going to give her too many points for that. And then we're stuck with mostly starting leaders. Leader, not leaders. And we're going to start with these two not leaders. Cao Ren here is going to sit in A. For obvious reasons, not as much leader boost as these. He has, on paper, the best skill in the game with Heavenly, the heal with the 6k heal over, or 3k heal over 60 seconds. But obviously long cooldown. He starts out with Household's Faction. He's easily attainable through marriage, by the way. But you can cut the cooldown down to about 56 seconds, which is great. There's potential here. It requires a lot of level up, a lot of setup to get there. So we're going to hold him back a bit. He also starts out with the gold bow, so he does have an extra item. He has 10% extra damage for bows on his armor, so that also synergizes nicely. But that's only going to get him into the A rank. Joining him in the A rank is going to be Liu Bei. We mentioned how his playstyle is designed around militias, and his weapon's not so good. Militia's not so good. So he's not going to be as competitive compared to a lot of the other leaders in the game, so he's going to hold him back a bit, and he's going to be in the A rank. Then joining him is going to be the likes of Yuan Shu. Terrible unique unit, so his background bonus focusing on melee infantry is going to hold him back a bit. He also has no unique items that starts with him. His armor's very, very bad. One of the weakest armors in this group. He has the worst robe out of everyone here. I think it's 15. It's the worst setup. So it's not going to take advantage of his familial conflict skill. So overall, just super weak. If he wasn't a faction leader with a bunch of faction-wide bonuses, he would probably drop a tier. But because he's a decent leader, he's going to be sitting here. Then I think joining them, we can probably put... No, I like everyone here. I think everyone here is going to be S tier. Distant Courage is really, really good. It's 50 points morale, which is huge. 50% melee charge bonus is also really big. So he's going to sit nicely in S. Cao Cao starts out with a very good sword, the best sword of all this group, a very good horse, and he has some very nice bonuses. It's very strong when you're playing as him, not as strong when you're not playing as him because you don't get the pawns, but 2 spies is not shabby either. And overall, not bad as a character, and his cut cooldown by half obviously can be very useful. Liu Chong was probably the strongest one here with his ability, Show of Force. Even without the cooldown decrease, 60 seconds is the cooldown, by the way. So technically, with these two combined, you can have that up, I think, every 26 seconds, which is just nuts. 3.8k damage on the arrow that also will do 15 points of morale damage. Just super, super strong. Liu Biao with the character salary discounts, with the extra diplomatic tributes, make him incredibly powerful. He also has some nice boosts or discounts for polearm infantry, which is a staple in any army. No unique skill going on for him, but those faction-wide bonus will carry him to the top here. And then Cao Pi carried entirely by the fact that he has 10% corruption reduction. There's really nothing else really going on. His armor is kind of weird in terms of value, and the 25 points of satisfaction is kind of interesting, but not really what's going to make him strong. No unique skills either. It's just 10% corruption reduction. That's really what's carrying him here. So that's going to do it with our character tier list for all the classes. We'll return next week. We'll take a little different format. We'll be looking at the characters from 8 princes. Not just the 8 princes themselves, but also there are semi-unique generals that starts out in each of the princes faction. We'll have a little bit of different format in terms of tier list because we will have to talk about those generals both in terms of their stat boost as well as who they are historically. And then we'll rank the 8 princes characters by their stats only and not the faction, if that makes any sense. Because I'm not going to take faction mechanic into the tier list. We'll do a faction rank in the future, but this is more of a character tier list. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this and see you guys next week. Bye!